Nice.
Yep.
Good
Hello.
morning. It's Monday.
Just to confirm, it's coffee in these cups. My boss doesn't like it when we bring wine to work on Monday morning. I was thinking about it since this is what we're talking about.
We are
today,
talking about wine, and
I figured
I wonder
I'd
if
stick
your
to
boss
coffee.
probably wouldn't like you to bring wine any morning. I'm just
That might be true. Yeah, maybe not just Mondays. I don't know. I'll ask him later.
You can ask him
Oh,
later. All good.
But yeah, yesterday was a fun morning.
It was so much fun.
It was
so
a
much
hot
fun.
morning,
It
but it was a fun morning.
And we were all looking at the weather forecast because we just didn't want to rain. Because
Yes.
we love
Yep.
being outside, doing the worship service outside, outdoor
Yep.
service. So much fun. I love it. And when it said 78, I was like, oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
But it felt like
That was not 78.
it felt like
degrees.
88. It just really
I
did.
don't know what was it, but I
But
had
it
the
was
same
fun,
thought.
man. It was
Yep.
just, you're outside. The sound is different. You're looking at the sky, looking at the trees, and everybody just in lawn chairs and beach chairs and blankets. And
Yep.
I don't know. Something about it I just
fun.
love. That's why we
It's
do
really
it
fun.
once a year.
Feels
Sometimes
like a big,
twice a year,
happy
but mostly.
picnic.
Yeah, one big
I love
happy
it.
picnic, and we're doing church.
I love
You know
it.
what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, it was good. And the message we had yesterday was one of those parables. So I've been looking at the graphic, right, for
Yeah.
this series. And this one was a challenging one to make like a cute little icon for. The first time I looked at it, I was like, is that a turkey leg? Like, what is
That is so
going
funny.
on?
That is so true. If you look back, you'll see what
it
she
looks
means.
like a turkey leg.
I mean, we could have just used a cluster of grapes or
Yep.
whoever the creative team, whatever, man. But it was just the
It was
wineskin.
wineskin, and I was
It's like, oh yeah, got it,
Yep.
got it, man.
which just kind of points to how unfamiliar most of us are
That's
with
true.
with what a wineskin
That's so true.
looks like and even is, because
Yeah.
like maybe they still use them in vineyards, but it's really probably more barrels. At
It
this
is. Well,
point,
when
and-
we were at the vineyard, I was talking to the vintner, the guy who cures and cares for all the vines and everything. When you walk into where they're actually making the wine, there's this massive,
okay,
almost 2-story stainless steel things.
Wow. Yep.
Like tanks, I guess.
Yep.
And then they use those, and then they put them under these really cool bottlers, and that's how they get
Okay.
all the fermentation. So there's no
Nice.
skin by
Yeah.
skin by skin by skin. But back then, there was no
That's
such
what they
thing
had
as
access to.
stainless. I mean,
Stainless
say, what is-
steel.
what is-
What do you
what are you
mean?
talking about?
Yep.
So yeah, you're right about that. That we're so unfamiliar with the process,
Yeah.
but the people of that day were so familiar
Right.
with the process of wine.
Right.
And
You mentioned that yesterday. I mean, it's like you walk down the street, most people would kind of just have a couple vines in their backyard, or at least have access to go to them.
That's exactly right. Or work at a vineyard, or
Yep.
do something. I mean, and then you walk into the country roads, there are vines all over the place, just all on the hills. And really, when you look at a lot of the parables, and you look at a lot of the scenery, it's either vines, which are the grapes, or it's olive trees. I mean, it's such a big commodity back then. So everybody understood exactly what Jesus was talking about as soon as he talked about it.
Right.
Which
we don't. So I was thankful to have that message yesterday to like really preach through it and be able to think about, we're making something new here in your life. Like, Jesus is coming in and he's gonna make something new. And that concept, I mean, I've read this parable before. We've all read the parable before.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that you skim through.
All right, cool, whatever. Like, I'm gonna move on to the next one that I can understand. So it was nice to sit in it yesterday.
And it is. I mean, it's a really simple parable, but when you start diving into it a little bit, and I think really in terms of what Jesus really meant by this, it is really encouraging. It's really encouraging, because I'm just going to read it. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the new wine would burst the wineskins, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. New wine must be stored in new wineskins. Okay, so we're like, all right, that's cool. But like you said, we're not familiar with that whole process. And this whole thing, if you really look at it, it's definitely about winemaking. It's about fermentation.
Right.
It's about the expansion.
Yeah.
And that's what I think people miss when they read through it. Yeah, you can't put the new into the old. For obvious reasons, it's going to expand. Jesus is about expanding the work inside of us and expanding his kingdom inside of us and helping us to arrive at new levels, new places all the time. But if we think that we can just hang on to the old and just, oh no, I'm not changing a thing, but I want Jesus to come and do that cool thing. But I don't want to change anything.
Right. Well, I was thinking about, it was funny, I was thinking about like a rubber band or like a hair tie, right? If I use the same hair tie every day for a year, by the end of the year, it's bigger and it's not really stretching anymore, and it's not holding my hair as well because it's been stretched to its limit. I got a lot of hair, and it's stretched to its limit, and it's no longer going to return to that original shape, which is kind of what was happening with the leather of the wineskins. Is with fermentation, like the bubbles and the gases that come out expand. It's like when you have a water bottle and you put it in somewhere hot, it kind of expands out. You open it, it's like, and like water's coming at you.
That's exactly right.
And so that leather has stretched. Well, it's not going to just go back when you empty it.
Right,
so
right.
If it's already stretched, you fill it all the way up again with new wine. The second that starts expanding, you're like, well, now my hair tie's broken, and what am I going to do at the gym? Like,
right,
you know?
right. And you lose it all. You lose the skin, you lose the, I mean, I'm not sure what they used the old wineskins for. Maybe just to hold water. I mean, seriously, they might have. But
it could have been used to hold wine that had already gone through the fermentation process.
But more importantly, you lose the wine. And it all gets exploded all over the place. And all that work that the vine dresser or the vintner, or they didn't call them vintners back then, but they called them vine dressers, and all the winemakers, man, they lost all that work.
Right. Well, and starting with all the way back at the vines, right? You know, I think you learned a lot about the process of turning the grapes into wine when you visited the winery the other day. A few years back, I got really interested in, okay, what goes into making a grapevine healthy? I was looking at John 15, where Jesus talks about how he is the vine and we are the branches, and there's a pruning process, right? So I'm like, okay, we have this going on. How do they take care? So because the vine dressers have just as much time and energy poured into the wine as the people that take the grapes and turn it into the wine, right? If not more.
Yeah.
And so what they do is as it prunes, so the vine is actually, you've got like the trunk, right?
The big thick stem that goes into the ground.
The vine is actually what runs along it comes out of that, it runs along. If you go to a vineyard, you see like wires. And they tie the vines like along the wires. And then the branches are the things that are sticking up along the vine. And the branches are where the fruit comes out of.
Okay.
And as they prune them, like you go to a winery today and like it's beautiful. They've got like straight lines. All of the branches are going like straight up and down. But they don't grow that way naturally. Somebody has to go through and prune. So like if it's going to grow down, it's not going to get the sunlight it needs. So they're going to prune it off so that branch isn't taking extra energy. But even all of the ones that grow straight up, they have to prune some of those too, because if they are too close together, there's not going to be enough air movement coming through, and the grapes will actually rot because the moisture won't be able to dry. It's wild. So there's a lot in John 15 where Jesus talks about it. He talks about how he prunes that are not very well. Let's just read it.
If I could read it, it's exactly what you're saying. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they will produce even more. And then it talks about them being pruned, and it's like, sounds like it's not using that as like, I'm not saying this is going to be easy. This might be painful, but I'm pruning because he wants you to bear even more fruit. I think that's really relevant to what we're talking about.
Well, because we're talking about how like Jesus is going to come in. He's going to start stretching us. He's going to start doing the
expanding
things.
In that wineskin.
Well, there's pruning process that has to go along with that, because if our shell looks exactly the same as it does when we come to know the Lord and commit to start walking with him, if we don't change things about what we're doing and what our life looks like, we're gonna pop. Like, we can't contain it.
That's a really good point. I mean, when you relate it back to that,
Mm-hmm.
the pruning process is also what Jesus is doing with us,
Yep.
to get rid of the things that, like you said, if it's a branch that's growing this way,
Mm-hmm.
it's alive, but it's not doing its work. It's kind of like, come on,
It's gonna
man,
miss the
you're
sunlight.
gonna miss the,
Yeah, it's
and it's taking up space for what Jesus wants us to do, and that's just be part of His kingdom and do as much good in this world as we possibly can.
Yep.
So you cut it off, and that hurts. That hurts. You let that go.
Other
Oh,
thing
man, I
that's
want to let it
crazy,
go.
right? So you got the vine going. You got the branches coming up. If a branch gets too tall, that's where they prune it back. Because if it gets too tall, even if it's one of the good ones, this is where it comes to, we prune back the ones that are producing fruit.
Yeah.
If it comes all the way up here and you start producing fruit up here, it's too far away from the vine for the nutrients to get to it and do what it needs to do.
So even a branch that is producing really good grapes, they even cut some of that off.
Cut it back.
And then you think, Jeff, why are you doing that? Because it's a good branch.
So you're like, wait, this is good up here. This is fruit. But it might not be the right fruit. Sometimes that's really challenging for us to have to think about.
That is so true.
This might be good, but is it right for me right now?
Is it the best?
Yeah.
You know, because I've always heard that statement where, you know, the enemy of the best is good. You know, I don't know if I'd take it that far, but you know what I mean? But good enough, and you never arrive.
Yeah.
But the pruning process helps you to arrive.
Yeah.
And then when Jesus comes into us and He's doing that expanding work, that's what He's doing. He's pruning so we bear more fruit, get more wine, and He's expanding. That fermentation process is really interesting.
Yeah.
He said, when you get the grapes, sometimes if they want the flavor of the wine correct, sometimes it starts fermenting on the vine. Just a little tiny bit.
Okay.
So there are times when they come in and crush the grapes, and they don't even need to put it in the tank that is for fermentation. They just go straight to bottling.
So they kind of just let them sit there a little extra.
And he called it some French word of wine.
It's always some French word. Oh.
And
I'm not fancy enough to understand.
I mean, the only one, we've heard of Chardonnay, but it wasn't that. But I'm sure that is the only French word I know.
Chardonnay.
Okay, that and Montreal, maybe.
Montreal. Bonjour. Oui.
Yeah, maybe those.
Some of those.
So they take all this juice and wine and whatever they do, and then they put it into these tanks that have this little valve on it that looks like a lot like this.
Okay.
And it's a check valve, so when they expand, it's got to let the gases out, or that tank is going to, be under too much pressure.
I imagine stainless steel doesn't bend quite the same way that leather used to.
But I mean, I've heard of pressure cookers that explode. I'm not good with that, man. I'm not.
Dude,
so
there's
tanks about the size of this room that we're in, and it's like you don't want that to happen. And so that whole thing is all about expanding and fermentation, and so they want to get that just right.
Right.
And he's got this laboratory right next to him to make sure it doesn't turn into vinegar and all this and that. He's checking, and man, he's like, it's a serious, it's kind of a serious business, But I think for our purposes, when we talk about this whole idea of, just having Jesus come in, we need the new wineskin to take the new wine. And when I look at the analogy this way, and I really do think it's valid to look at it this way, Jesus wants to bring into us himself, which He brings in the fruit of the Spirit.
Right.
He brings in His promises. He brings in the strength and the power and the peace and the wisdom and the direction.
Yeah.
And all of that.
I mean, the Spirit, Himself is in us. That's like.
And so that's the point.
Yep.
That is the point. That the Holy Spirit is that new wineskin that is able to hold that. I understand the Trinity is all one, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but at the same time, there's different functions of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right? And part of the work of the Holy Spirit, you take in all of that, and we do that expanding work, and the Holy Spirit allows us to have this growing faith that's really vibrant, that's really doing something. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
That's what makes this analogy really amazing.
Yeah. And it's so much more amazing and so much more fun to read and think about when you actually understand what Jesus is comparing to. You know, I mean, we both have done that in teaching many times. Like, it's kind of like being on a team, or it's kind of like we draw parallels.
We have to
all the time.
We have to, or these are kind of complicated things.
Yep.
Yet they're simple things, and that's when Jesus says, "I'm going to take this complicated thing that's actually a pretty simple thing, but nobody knows it's a pretty simple thing because it's so complicated. Let me just throw a parable in there.
I'm going to give it to them in something simple to them." So like all of this crazy things that like we just talked about, from the vines to how he's making the wine, is like that felt simple to the people Jesus was talking to.
They understood it.
Baffles me because it does not feel simple, but it was such part of their daily life. And I just always come back to, it's such a gift that Jesus gave, like, his message in ways that were so clear and understandable to people. I mean,
I agree.
He's God. He is so above that, the fact that he lowered himself even just in his language, in the ways that he was sharing truth with us.
Yeah, I agree.
It's so cool.
I agree. It's an amazing thing to know that he's doing that kingdom work inside of all of us if we would just allow him to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's good, man.
All right. Well,
it's good. Good talk for the Monday morning,
Indeed. A little bit rainy, a little dreary, but a good talk.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot,
I love
Layna.
it here.
It's good.
I'm
it's a good. I'm glad we do this too, man.
All right.
All right. See you guys.